Excuse me. It's the Spaceman coming to you from my area to yours. Just sitting at the kitchen table, smoking a upside down. Maybe it should be upside down because it's a Gurkha Evil cigar, right? Having a Gurkha and enjoying a cup of, you guessed it, chock full of nuts, Heavenly Blend from the Big Can. So anyway, it's just a short video. Just sitting here hanging out with a Colibri lighter that doesn't want to work anymore. You can hear the gas coming out. It's like from 98. It worked. It was working. And me and my big ideas, I decided I was going to turn the torch up a little bit. And the trash can's about 6 feet over that way, so I'm tempted, believe me. But we're going to hold on to it, and I'm going to tinker with it a little bit and see if I can get it working. That's okay, because I will go in my pocket and pull out my trusty Zippo. Yep, this is one of my new Zippos. It's got a coffee theme going on it. Isn't that cool? Or what? So, let's see if this one will light. Yeah. You're really not supposed to have to relight a cigar, of course. You're really supposed to just let the ash cake just keep burning out till it gets really big, and puffing on it every few minutes. But I had to walk away because I was playing with the lighter. Can always count on trusty Zippo. Okay. Phone call. We're going to skip that one this time. We'll let the voicemail get it. What's this video about, you're probably asking, right? Well, it's in response to a video that I had just seen on YouTube a few weeks back about, is rock and roll dead? And of course rock and roll is not dead. Because if it was dead, there wouldn't still be rock and roll CDs being sold by the millions on Amazon or in the music stores down here in Florida, at least. A lot of music stores. I don't know about up north, but where I came from, a lot of them had disappeared. They were all but gone. So, a lot of people ask the question, where are all the rock stars of today? How come there aren't any? I guess the last real true rock star of its kind was Kurt Cobain of Nirvana. And why did that die off? Well, I could give you a few die off in a way where, I'm going to say this much, okay? Rock and roll in the way where rock bands are being promoted, new rock bands by the record companies, in that way it's dead, okay? Why? Because there's no money in it. Rock and roll became a music business, a marketing business, a huge marketing corporate entity. When I grew up and I was a kid, there were, in the late 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of different record labels, and there were a lot of different bands, and there were all kinds of different bands. Bands would come out with its own sound, like, for instance, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But the record companies weren't looking for, after which, Prague became big, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, King Crimson. But the record companies weren't looking for the next Yes. The record companies weren't looking for the next King Crimson. They weren't looking for 10 different King Crimsons like they did when Kurt Cobain died. It was like let's look for the next 100 Nirvanas, okay? It turned into a really strictly money, corporate entity, business fact, okay? Entity, excuse me, bad choice of words. Entity would be the correct term. So basically, in the early 70s, this wasn't the case. Every time an innovative band would come out, or an innovative artist like David Bowie, T-Rex, or Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, which some of these bands started in the late 60s, kind of metamorphosized in the early 70s, and this was my favorite, and still is my favorite time period for rock music. There was prog rock, there was hard rock, there was progressive hard rock, there was heavy metal, which they called heavy metal back then, there was glitter rock, there was punk rock, which came along a little bit later. You name it, it was out there, okay? There was all sorts of underground, great underground, okay? Like Hawkwind, and there's a lot of innovators. For instance, Motorhead, who came in on the heels of the punk rock movement and basically invented thrash and speed metal. But was everybody looking for the next Motorhead? Absolutely not. This band's influenced many people to come. I mean, Metallica. If you had no Motorhead or Lemmy, you wouldn't have Metallica, you wouldn't have Nirvana, you wouldn't have Alice in Chains, you wouldn't have any of those bands, okay? If you didn't have Bowie, you wouldn't have Stone Temple Pilots, you wouldn't have, there's some other glam grunge bands. There's all kinds of terms now, okay? Basically, back then, they really didn't categorize as much as they do now. For instance, take a group like Blue Oyster Cult. Blue Oyster Cult really did not fit into one specific category per se. They were a band who, they were Blue Oyster Cult were Blue Oyster Cult. They were their own thing. Rush started out like kind of like a heavy, kind of sound like Led Zeppelin on their first 3 albums, but then they became Rush. They invented their own sound. They developed their own style. They carved their own identity. So this is what was going on, okay? But as the years went on into the 80s, it just became more and more and more of a corporate entity. All the record labels dissolved and were condensed and bought out by basically 3 major record labels. I believe it was Warner Brothers. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was Warner Brothers, Atlantic, and Columbia, maybe, or CBS. Whatever it was like 3 major labels. So everything seemed to kind of condense together into this big corporate entity, which is what happens when things become big. A lot of times they get ruined. And so the marketing hence commenced, okay? So by the time the 90s got here, the early 90s, you had all these heavy metal glam bands in the 80s, okay? And everybody wanted to sound like Aerosmith. If you notice, you listen to Aerosmith Rocks, listen to a song called Nobody's Fault. And you will hear Motley Crue, okay? Plain as day. They got their sound from that. Everybody either wanted to sound like Ozzy Osbourne, who came forward with a solo career with Randy Rhoads, who was a very innovative guitarist. They either wanted to sound like Ozzy, guitar-wise, Randy Rhoads. Eddie Van Halen came along in the late 70s, and everybody wanted to sound like Eddie Van Halen, with a singer that sounded like Steven Tyler, or Motley Crue, or Ozzy Osbourne, or Dio, Ronnie James Dio. So you see where we're going with this? It's starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then you had everybody lumping each style into a specific category, compartmentalizing the whole landscape of rock music in general. So they would pigeonhole you. If you were in a band, you had to be pigeonholed. They had to put you in a category. That's heavy metal. That's space rock. That's, you had Pink Floyd, who came out with Dark Side of the Moon in the early 70s, and which later became a very, very, very commercialized success for the band. Although it didn't start out commercially, I was about 8 years old. My brother brought the album home, or I was 9, I think, something like that. And the album came out. He brought it home. He opened it up. He took the stickers out. I stuck them on my bicycle seat, and I had one of them little spider bikes. You know, it was kind of cool. And he played the album for me, and it was like weird. It was different. But as time went on, all this stuff became what they now call classic rock, a term which I absolutely despise and loathe, okay? I cannot stand the term classic rock because it lumps in so many different bands that shouldn't be lumped into that category. And so the respect, the categorization, the compartmentalizing, all of this nature kind of took over the business as we saw it. And in the 80s, everything became, from the early days, 60s, 70s, became classic rock. You had your new wave, you had Gary Newman with Cars, and then you had the Cars, and there was a new wave, which took punk and dance rock together, formed new wave and punk and disco. Blondie was the one who did that, formed dance rock. So then you had new wave, Gary Newman, and you had all this stuff combined together in the 80s. So the 80s was kind of like a melding pot, sort of to speak, of this stuff. But after that, the early 90s, Kurt Cobain, Nirvana came along, just completely changed the whole scene. And then after that, everybody all the record companies wanted the next Nirvana. Everybody wanted the next Pearl Jam. Everyone wanted the next Stone Temple Pilots. I think Stone Temple Pilots were kind of a takeoff on those bands' sound. And it seemed like the downloads and all this stuff mixed in, combined with that, the lack of sales of CDs, and everything just, business-wise. Interest-wise, no. People are still playing rock music. They're still playing live. A lot of people now are getting tired of this drum machine stuff, and the bands that play, they're not even bands. They want to see live music again. But now you got this group, Greta Van Fleet, who are a Led Zeppelin copy band. I mean, come on. Let's stop copying. Let's get out there and do your own thing. Do your own thing, man. I mean, that's what it's all about. And it just basically died off to the point where now you look at it, and the blues, right? We had a blues resurgence in the 80s. But you look at it now, and it's like, okay, where are we now? It seems that everybody has just... rock music in general fell by the wayside. And I blame a lot of it on this looking for the next new Nirvana, and people are going to get tired of it. I'm hearing the same thing all the time. Everybody stop listening to the radio. Nobody want to listen to the radio anymore. You get Sirius radio, cable radio. Oh, we're cool because we don't have commercials. We play this style. We play that style. Well, we still need as a band to come along and do something new and creative. And we need the record companies to start looking for a different band. Yes, put that band on the map. Put them out there. But put your radar on looking for other innovative bands. Don't keep looking for the next band like that, okay? So that is what killed the industry. So now you got record companies, they're not going to invest in bands anymore. It's basically do your own thing. Record your own music and get it out there when you can. Or how you can. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on rock and roll. No, it's not dead, technically. But yes, in a business sense, it's dead. You still got old bands touring that are classic, but this is where we're at. So, rock on.